I don't want to be the bad guy anymore.
I don't want to be the bad guy anymore.
Oh yeah, he doesn't say that line, does he? Hang on.
I don't want to be the bad guy anymore.
There. Seamless. The Bad Guy. It's a style. It's a way of life. It's a Billie Eilish song that sounds like a depressed merry-go-round. But most of all, it's a trope that writers just love to put in their works. And I'm not talking about the pure, evil, villainous, drown a baby in the well and then go out for burgers kind of bad guy. No, I'm talking about the quote-unquote bad guy. The character that is bad in title alone. The character who takes up the mantle of being the big, mean, no good antagonist, but in reality, if life and or society just gave them a chance or a choice or an alternate path of any kind, people would realize that they're not quite as dangerous as their previous persona would have you believe. At best, a story like this can really deconstruct the concepts of what's good and what's evil, who's right and who's wrong, the deeper complexities of societal struggles, and how you can't paint a full picture with only black and white. And at worst, well, gosh darn, you love to see them try. It's a widely used trope for a reason, since it opens up a lot of doors for drama, character study, and even comedy. Heck, it's being used as recently as Dreamworks The Bad Guys, which is coming out this weekend. So it's obvious that people are still really interested in this type of story. But does anyone remember that time during the 20th of tens when the animation world's three big boys all took a shot at this same concept, with one of them using it as their debut appearance?
The legend, the runner-up, and the rookie.
Well, I do! And with the public's mind once again focused on bad guy redemption stories, I thought it would be fun to analyze these 3-decade-old films and see which one holds up the best when it comes to giving a bad guy a second chance. Keep in mind, I'm not going to be looking at these movies in their entirety. I'm mostly just going to be focusing on the actual bad guy redemptions and how well I thought they were handled. I adore all 3 of these movies, and if I really wanted to dig into them, I would need at least 2 hours each, which is time I sadly just don't have right now. I mean, what do I look like, a billionaire? I look like a lot of things, but that's not one of them. Anyways, if you have any thoughts on these 3 films and how they handled their baddies turned good, feel free to leave a comment below. But for now, it's Disney vs. Dreamworks vs. Illumination Entertainment for the coveted bad guy belt. Let's see who comes out on top. So, is it possible to have a serious discussion about a movie best known for Facebook memes and juvenile humor?
Comedy.
Well, I'm gonna do my best. Yeah, despite their overabundance of sequels and reliance on yellow pills for the funnies, I actually still think the Despicable Me movies are really adorable, especially the first one. They just have this charming sense of emotional wholesomeness and family values that I always gravitate towards. And believe it or not, this is one of its biggest strengths when it comes to its bad guy redemption. I know a lot of people dismiss the first film as childish garbage nowadays given the franchise's reputation, and even when you look at the story on the surface, it doesn't really seem like much. Basically, it's just, bald guy, big nose, was a villain, met some girls, so cute, now I'm good, also Tic Tacs. But based on bits of evidence from the first and even second movies, things seem to be a little bit more complex than that. Gru's story is not just about learning how nice it is to be a father, it's about finding a purpose, any kind of purpose, that makes his life worthwhile. His childhood, at least what we know of it for now, was permeated by a constant stench of inadequacy. His mom was indifferent to his dreams and even insulted him regularly. Everyone his age was completely reviled by him, leading to no friends and especially no girlfriend. So it's obvious that he grew up a very sad and lonely kid. And while it's never outwardly stated, you do get the idea that turning to a life of crime was just a futile last-ditch attempt to give himself the things that life had constantly kept away from him. The universe refuses him to have nice things? Well, he's just gonna take them by force. There's no one in the world that can ever love him? Well then, he's just gonna create his own friends and loved ones from scratch. Or, at least it used to be canon that Gru created the minions, as shown by multiple bits of evidence. But then their titular movie completely rewrote the story for the sake of the green. You know what, for the sake of this argument, I'm just gonna stick with the original canon before Minions, aka movies 1 and 2, if that's okay with you guys. Alright? Alright. Anyway, Gru did see some early success as a villain and basically created so many minions that he probably has more friends and loved ones than he'll ever need. But no matter how many landmarks he stole or how many corn kernels he cloned, he could never truly feel that organic sense of purpose that he's been after his whole life. This was a distraction at best, and an even bigger disappointment at worst. And as he got older and slowly drifted past his prime, he started to realize that he may never find that purpose he's always been after. This is why I think the whole stealing the moon mission has a greater meaning than just, mine is bigger than yours. It's essentially Gru going back to the one time in his life when he was actually happy and passionate about something, wanting to be an astronaut one day and visit the moon. And this was going to be a twofold victory, being his ultimate take that at the world that rejected him, while also giving him a chance to go to space proper like he always dreamed of. Maybe this big victory will fill that space that's been empty inside him for years. But in the end, the thing that completed Gru wasn't the moon or the heist or anything like that. It was the 3 little girls with the old lady names. They were the things that gave him his self-worth in the end. And it led to a much happier life, a much happier mom, and no need to take up the mantle of bad guy anymore. Now obviously I needed to do a lot of interpreting and reading between the lines with this whole thing, because Gru's motivations and backstory aren't really the best explained. I know the focus was more on Gru and the girls bonding, but if we really wanted a fully understandable bad guy redemption story, you kinda gotta show what led to him becoming a baddie in the first place. What led him down that path. And for the time being at least, we haven't really been shown that. But one thing that the movie is good at showing is that Gru isn't really a bad person. It's obvious even from the beginning that he's just a guy who was dealt a really bad hand in life. He was completely ostracized by everyone through no fault of his own, and through evil deeds, he tries to take matters into his own hands to gain some sense of self-worth. Heck, even when he's out doing his evil deeds in his introductory scene, I never really got the idea that he was truly bad. Most of his wrongdoings are just kinda petty crimes on the society that shunned him. I mean, what does he do? He gives a kid a balloon animal only to pop it afterwards, he cuts the Starbucks line while giving everyone else some iced coffee, and later on he shoves aside a few cars because he hates parallel parking. I mean, let's face it, there is not a single human being on this planet that likes parallel parking, so you gotta cut him some slack there. I mean, come on, his weapon of choice is a freeze ray, a freaking freeze ray. Not a laser gun or a death beam or anything potentially lethal, just a gun that freezes you in place, and once you thaw or even break yourself out, you're totally fine. While he does do his petty little revenge stuff, I never really got the sense that he wanted to kill anyone or do anything super cruel. Even when Edith supposedly dies in the Iron Maiden, he didn't get a sick thrill out of it or anything, he just kinda went, well, that's unfortunate. On with the plan, I guess. And need I mention his relationship with his minions? He doesn't treat them like trash or abuse them or whatever. He congratulates them and thanks them and gives them genuine love. He even provides them with a really positive working environment. Heck, they've got their own aerobics studio when they're not on the clock. How cool is that? Sure, he doesn't give them a raise, but hey, that's employment for you. Gru was never evil. The world just needed to give him a chance. And adopting the girls was that chance. Speaking of the girls, another point in Gru's favor was that his change from bad to good was very well paced. You really buy the fact that this little trio is turning his life around, and you understand why he would bond with them so quickly. I mean, not only does each girl kind of link up with one of his personality traits, like Margot matching his cynical seriousness, Edith matching his knack for anarchy and chaos, and Agnes matching his secret squishy softer side, but the events that warm him up to them make total sense. I mean, the first time that he really feels attached to the girls is when Carney over yonder here cheats them out of a carnival prize and aggressively mocks them afterwards. Huh, they're getting cheated and put down by society through no fault of their own. Who does that sound like? But yeah, the pacing and development of their relationship is all kinds of solid, and they do a great job of showing us how this one instance of life cutting Gru a break was really all he needed to be happy. You can mock Illumination all you want for their more mediocre movies, but you definitely can mock them for a solid bad guy redemption. Like I said, there's a lot of reading between the lines that needs to be done to understand it fully, so it would have been nice if they showed a little bit more of Baldy's childhood, but overall, I think Gru's redemption has some solid pacing, great execution, and a very wholesome vibe. It's impossible not to smile and make high-pitched noises as you see him interacting with his new daughters. It's purity in its purest form. Anyway, I'll see you in a few months when Minions Rise of Gru screws with the continuity yet again. Or maybe not, we'll have to see. Okay. You ever see one of those movies that receives unrelenting fandom praise, and then you watch it yourself, and you're just completely and utterly disappointed? Well, luckily Megamind is not one of those movies, because this thing freaking rocks! This is the cult movie to end all cult movies. I mean, it definitely did well at the box office, don't get me wrong, but the amount of fandom praise this movie received after it left theaters is mega mind-boggling. And it's deserved, too. This movie beautifully subverts the classic comic book hero versus villain tropes, while also paying homage to them and being fun as heck. I mean, who doesn't want to see Soup Pit Man flex his godly thighs while making blue dabble dee dabble die? Nobody, that's who. This is one of those movies that really deserves its own video, but like I said before, I'm gonna control myself for now and just talk about the bad guy redemption on its own. And right off the bat, it's already one step above the previous bald baddie. Unlike Despicable Me, where Gru's motivations are just kinda touched on, leaving you to connect the dots, Megamind's reasoning for evil is fully shown and well explained. From the moment the little Booberry was born, he had no clear indication of what his destiny was. Heck, his parents weren't even able to finish their sentence when they were telling him what he was destined for, so he was sent away without a clue about what's in store for him. And the funny thing is, little M actually started off as a really nice kid. Sure, he was raised by prisoners and taught that robberies are good and cops are bad and whatnot, but that's more of a nature versus nurture situation. It's not really who he is, it's just how he was brought up. Heck, not only was he let out on good behavior, but he actually started taking notes from Metro Man and trying to do good deeds. He tried to make the kids puppet corn in his own cute sciencey way. But just like Gru, the poor guy was ostracized by society through no fault of his own and hated by pretty much everyone. And unlike Gru, where it was implied that he became a villain of his own accord, Megamind was literally shoved into the villain role multiple times by everyone around him, to the point where they actually gave him no choice but to be the bad guy. Like, what is wrong with these people? I don't know about you, but if Megamind was my student and he did these little destructive experiments in my class, I would teach him the importance of intention versus action. Where even when you try to do good things with the best of meanings, sometimes you do have to face consequences when they turn out poorly. You know, instead of just giving him the consequences without a single iota of gray area. But that's what they did, which led to Megamind's entire purpose being fueled by one thing: fighting Metro Man. You see this? This right here? All of this? This is the only thing that Megamind is able to define himself by. This big good versus evil show with flashy fights and witty banter. This whole WWE style face versus heel thing. This is what Megamind defines his existence by because it's all they allow him to have. So he plays it up. He completely indulges himself in the role. He goes full Tim Curry ham with his performance in this big show because, based on what society has taught him, that's just how things are supposed to be. But once again, we're given evidence that despite these deeds, he's not really a bad person. He treats his minion like his best friend, his robots like loyal pets. And even though he puts on the illusion that he's gonna kill people many times, it's obvious that he never really goes through with it. He's not that kind of guy. I mean, most of his crimes take place in unpopulated areas, like the abandoned observatory at the beginning of the movie. And even when he does his whole hostile takeover after Metro Man's defeat, he pretty much tells the citizens to just go about their daily lives as he causes a little mayhem, implying that no harm will come to them. You might see a car fly overhead, or an art museum get pillaged, or a building get tagged by the Blue Man Group, and that's about it. Have a good day at your 9 to 5. Heck, even Roxanne, who's pretty much his Princess Peach, knows for sure that he'd never harm her. They basically just have idle conversation while they're waiting for Metro Man most of the time. They know this is just a big performance at the end of the day. However, after he beats Metro Man and has his little evil overlord high, he starts to realize that life doesn't really have a purpose anymore. Those little squabbles with Metro Man was all he was allowed to have, and now it's gone. Everything's done. The show is over. They've aired the season finale, and now there's nothing else to watch. Ever. Eventually, Megamind does attempt to look for answers to his problem, and while he does find what he's looking for, he also comes across something he never expected to have: a chance at a new life. After he dons his Bernard disguise, Megamind finally gets the opportunity to do all the kinds of things that were originally closed off to him. Not just dating the girl of his dreams, but little things like riding bikes in the park or going to dine at fancy restaurants. Eventually, he starts cleaning up his act and even contemplates quitting the villain game altogether. But when Roxy breaks up with him and opens old wounds in the process, he falls back into his old villain role, now having solid proof that he, Megamind, can never be anything else but the bad guy. Until he teams up with Roxy to save the city, shows off his insane showmanship, sends Incel Man packing, and wraps up the movie with the perfect statement: Destiny isn't the path given to us, it's the path we choose for ourselves. This, in my opinion, is a near-perfect bad guy redemption. His backstory? Understandable. His demeanor? Super sympathetic. His changing of sides? Freaking adorable. And the eventual payoff where he becomes Metro City's hero? Heck yes. This story not only manages to be an insanely fun villain versus hero romp and a fantastic dive into a deep blue character, but it also kind of feels like they're pointing a finger at society, saying things like, hey, stop forcing individuals into certain roles, whether that be holding them up on a pedestal or shoving them in a corner, and treat them all equally. Because if you don't, you're gonna really mess them up. I have so much more to say about this movie in general, but if we're going just by the redemption story, this thing is all tops. Well, that's gonna be tough to beat. What's next? Oh no. Do you realize how hard it is to be unbiased when one of your favorite movies of all time is on this list? Wreck-It Ralph is one of my favorite films of all time. Not animated films, not Disney films, just films in general. I adore everything about it. The art style, the music, the creative design of the video game world, the voice acting, the colors, the story, the message, the twist villain, the puns, and especially the characters. If I ever stop doing weekly content, which probably won't happen for a while, I would easily make one of those 4-hour-long super reviews covering every aspect of this film in detail. And it seems like I'd be one of the first, since Wreck-It Ralph reviews aren't exactly a crowded market on the YouTubes. Kind of a shame, honestly. But again, chug those chill pills for a second, and let's cover what we came here for. The way Ralph was redeemed. I think the best way to sum up Ralph compared to the other two is this. If Megamind is a wide-eyed child who still gets thrills from his lot in life, and Gru is a halfway defeated guy who still has an ounce of spring in his step, then Ralph is a bitter old man who is just done with trying to do anything about his situation and has accepted his fate wholesale. And who can blame him? This guy has nothing. At least our two previous baddies had some modicum of happiness in their lives. Gru had Dr. Mario and his little Simpson tumors. Megamind had his robots, his pet fish, and his big show with Metro Man. But Ralph has literally nothing, except for a pile of bricks, a stump, and the occasional drink at the bar. That's it. And even after 30 years of the same shtick with pretty much nothing to show for it, he's still a really nice guy. A little socially awkward, sure, but very kind. He gives Q*bert's characters a pack cherry when their game gets unplugged. He seems to have a good relationship with Tapper. He's pretty chill at the party until Gene starts heckling him. And his relationship with Vanellope is just the cutest thing ever. It'd be hard for anyone to remain so kind given his circumstances, so that's pretty impressive. So yeah, not wanting to live in squalor for another 3 decades, Ralph actually gets off his Titanic tuchus and tries to get himself a medal. The only thing that will apparently get him the respect he rightfully deserves. This causes complete chaos in the arcade, not only leaving Fix-It Felix Jr. under looming threat of being unplugged, but also releasing a rogue Cybug into the Sugar Rush world, which will not only tear that game apart, but every other one afterwards. On his journey, Ralph meets Vanellope von Schweetz, who he learns is in a similar situation to his own, and he does everything he can to help her get out of it. And it all ends with Vanellope getting her rightful place in her game restored, the Nicelanders realizing how much they need their bad guy, and Ralph finally getting the life he deserves. Similar to Gru and his tiny trio, the relationship between Ralph and Vanellope is all kinds of adorable. This is essentially Ralph's first true friend in a world that generally hates him, and the way they bond over similar situations makes a ton of sense. If anything, Ralph probably realizes that Vanellope is in an even worse situation than him. At least he's able to leave when he so desires, but she's stuck in that cruel, harsh world forever. And that compels him to aid her in her own quest for respect and happiness, since he knows exactly how she feels and sees that she has even less options than he does. Pile on the extra toppings full of adorable interactions, exchanges, and even insults, and you probably have one of my favorite duos in all of Disney animation. But I haven't even gotten to Wreck-It Ralph's best trait when it comes to bad guy redemption. The delivery of its message. We know there's the obvious moral of loving yourself in spite of the labels people put on you. You know, I'm bad, and that's good. I will never be good, and that's not bad. There's no one I'd rather be than me. But there's also a much deeper, multifaceted message that I started to pick up on the more times I watched the movie. Let me put it this way. If Megamind is pointing a finger at society and telling them to get their act together, then Ralph is pointing a finger at society and you. Yes, you, person in a terrible situation, whether it be related to job, family, or general life stuff. Are you being treated like garbage, being given arbitrary labels and no respect? Has this been going on for years with some facet of society or an organization constantly putting you down for no good reason? Well, Ralph is here to deliver some sound advice. If you're in a situation that you feel is unfair, then you gotta get up and do something about it. Even if you gotta rustle a few jimmies, rattle a few chains, break a few eggs in the process, people's minds are not gonna be changed if you just sit there and be complacent with the hand you've been dealt in life. I mean, yeah, the entire arcade was put in jeopardy because of Ralph's choice to leave, but as sad as that is, sometimes things like that have to happen for the world as a whole to realize there's a problem. And when it comes to society, the film shows that it's in everyone's best interest to just give all people the equal respect and appreciation they rightfully deserve beforehand. Otherwise, if they decide to leave or take action, the world will soon realize that their absence has a bigger impact on certain things than they initially thought. I know it's not always ideal to take action, there's always different circumstances, I totally understand that, but the movie shows that getting up and doing something can often lead to a better life for you and for others. More respect, better treatment, and even a few friends you make along the way. I also really like how they used King Candy as a sort of cautionary tale of what can happen if that something you do goes too far. He tried to achieve his goals through manipulation, violence, and hostile takeovers, which obviously goes beyond just breaking a few eggs, and he was rightfully punished for it. Meanwhile, all that Ralph did was temporarily step outside the rules to achieve his goal, with plans to return home later. He didn't intend to cause the arcade apocalypse, he's just a doof who didn't think things through. And all Vanellope did was want to construct her own cart to participate in the race, despite everybody being glitchist against her. It's nice that they included King Candy to show that there should be limits when it comes to trying to improve your current situation. And while doing something is definitely a good idea, make sure you don't go too insane with your actions. Anyway, going back to Ralph's bad guy story, while I do think that it could be a little more complete since we don't really see how he was treated through any of the past 30 years, I feel like the twofold message, decent pacing, adorable Ralph and Vanellope relationship, and the insane amount of sympathy that I felt for our main guy initially makes for a really good story. There's obviously a lot more to Wreck-It Ralph that I couldn't get into in this vid, but if we're looking solely at his bad guy redemption, this one's worth at least 2 million XP. Well, that about wraps it up. Looking at all three of these movies, each of their bad guy stories have their obvious strengths. I feel like Despicable Me was the strongest emotionally, Megamind was the most structurally sound, and Wreck-It Ralph had the most worthwhile message. But if I had to pick one to rule them all, I personally have to go with Megamind. I may think that Ralph is the overall better film, but going solely off the idea of the bad guy story, old M&M easily has the tightest written story, complete with plenty of emotion and a great underlying message. The other two aren't far behind, but I do think that Dreamworks comes out on top in this bout. Let's see if they can protect their title with their next Bad Guys movie. But for now, what do you guys think? Who do you believe had the best bad guy redemption story? Which of these movies is your overall favorite? And would you like to see me talk about these films in more detail at some point? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.